Okay, so we're going to create a multi-joint chain setup. I would like to see this implemented at the very least on the arms and the legs. So I'm going to use an arm for our scenario. So I'm going to the hypergraph, got the shoulder selected, and I've already got two shoulders here. So I'm going to duplicate this skeleton one more time. Control D. And then temporarily I'm going to grab the shoulders from all three groups and group them into their own hierarchy, just so I can visually make this easier to comprehend. You need to pick a kind of a parent joint for these to belong to. In this case, the clavicle is it. And one of these is my bind. And one is my just a duplicate. So I need to rename this one. So if I go to modify, search and replace, I'm going to search for bind underscore bind and replace it with underscore FK. And verifying my selection real quick. Click apply. I accidentally unparented them. That was nice. Okay. So these are my FK joints. I need to rename these to replace underscore JNT with underscore IK. Replace. And then I'm going to take out this one. Okay. Now, I'm most of the way there. All I have to do is make both of these control the bind skeletons, bind joints. So just so I can make a pattern of it, I'm going to unparent the bind joints, and then I'm going to reparent them to group 1. So they're in the order that I'm going to use them in. So I'm going to select shoulder IK, shift select shoulder FK, and then shift select shoulder bind. It's driver driven is the ordering that we're using. I'm going to go to constrain. We want to use an orient constraint. We do not want any offset in these. They're duplicates, so they shouldn't need any offset. And then we'll just click apply. Okay. Elbow IK, elbow FK, elbow bind. Apply. Wrist, wrist, wrist. Apply. And I'm not really concerned about this joint, because that's one I'm just going to get rid of eventually anyway. Okay, so now if I were to grab my IK joint chain and rotate it, then I have the bind joints floating in between the FK and the IK. So I need to be able to control that somehow. So typically on a wrist control or on a main controller of some sort, we'll create a custom attribute to control how these work. So let me create my temporary control. Guess I should show NURBS curves. Scale that down just so it's not annoyingly large. Okay, normally I would do a lot better job of this controller thing. Okay. So there's my hand control. And I need to create an attribute on here. So I'm going to add attribute. And this is IKFK blend. And I always like to use a float for this. So we'll do a minimum of 0, maximum of 10, a default of 0, and we'll click OK. So there's my custom attribute. Now I can use set-driven keys to drive the constraints. So when I select the constraints, and the reason that I always selected them in the same order, the IK, then the FK, and then the bind, well, first of all, it's driver, driver driven. But second of all, then I know that these are going to be listed in the constraint. These attributes that get added to an orient constraint, they'll be listed in the same order with IK on top, FK on the bottom. So I need to select all three of these constraints. I'm going to go to Animate, Set Driven Keys, Set, loads up all the constraints. Grab my controller, load driver, and the first thing I need to do is go through each constraint and turn off the IK. And you're going to see the arm start to align itself to the FK joints because I'm turning off the IK joints. Influence. Okay. Now I'm going to select the two influence objects. I can't select them all at the same time because they don't share the same name, attribute name. So I have to do it one at a time. I need to select both these attributes and click key. And then for the elbow and for the shoulder. Okay. Now I need to go to my IKFK blend and change that to 10. And now I need to invert these attributes. So changing the 0 to a 1 on the IK, and on the FK joint at the 1 to a 0. Okay. Then I can go ahead and hit key. I highly recommend making a pattern out of this. It almost always gets everybody. In fact, I can't remember if I had that selected, so I'm going to key it again just to make sure. Okay. Select that. 1 and 0. Key. 1 and 0. Key. Okay. Now, if I can blend between the IK and FK versions of the arm. Now, obviously, my IK arm doesn't have IK on it yet, but you can add that to this joint chain only. Now, the final step that you really need in this it's like I accidentally rotated it more than I thought. Shoulder, yeah. There we go. Okay, so I got them all set back to default. So the final step in this is we could call this the arms group. Arms left underscore group. And really, there's any number of ways to do this. But I like to kind of break up the skeleton just so it's easier to understand what's going on. And then this skeleton, these arms need to follow the bind clavicle. And in fact, I can delete this skeleton, don't need it. So this is going to be the parent of this. So we go to constraint. So, well, before I do that, I shouldn't say this. So this is my clavicle bind. Is going to drive the arms group. Okay. So use the parent constraint. Maintain offset, yes. Add. Okay. Now, if I were to grab the clavicle, it's going to move the arm still, but now I've got multiple joints in the arm that I can still animate without side effects. There's any number of places they may be useful, but most of the time it's arms and legs. Well, arms and legs are standard. They're going to have it. Anyway, so that completes your setup for a multi-joint chain setup. Okay. Now that's lacking in some features. It would be nice to be able to make your IK match your FK and your FK match your IK arm, so that when you want to switch between them mid-scene, you can do that easily. But I'm not. That's more complicated. I'm not going to show you that.